Marcus was just another mechanic working in a small motorcycle repair shop. The place was tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, known only to those who truly cared about their bikes. It wasn't the flashiest place, but it was a good job. Marcus loved fixing motorcycles more than anything. His hands were skilled from years of working on engines, tuning carburetors, and adjusting chains. It was something he was good at, something he was proud of. The shop was owned by Mr. Collins, a man who wasn't much for talking. He ran the place with a steady hand and a no-nonsense attitude. The customers mostly knew Marcus by name because he was the one they trusted with their bikes. Over the years, he'd built a reputation for being reliable and efficient. That was until one fateful day, when everything changed. It started with the sound of a heavy engine rumbling outside. Marcus looked up from the bike he was working on. He wasn't expecting anyone special. The usual customers came in and out, but this sound was different. It was deep, powerful, and intimidating. As the sound grew louder, Marcus saw it. A black Harley-Davidson roared into the parking lot. The rider wore a leather jacket with the unmistakable patch of a Hell's Angel on the back. The sight of that jacket alone sent a wave of unease through the air. Hell's Angels weren't the kind of people you messed with, and their bikes were often their most prized possessions. The rider parked the bike with a loud screech of the tires and dismounted. Marcus could see the man's face, rough and weathered, with tattoos snaking down his arms. He was a classic Hell's Angel, tough, fearless, and not someone you wanted to cross. He walked toward the shop, his boots thumping on the concrete floor. Marcus stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. He wasn't scared, but he wasn't sure what to expect either. "Can you fix it?" the man asked, his voice low but firm. Marcus nodded. "What's the issue?" The man motioned to the Harley. "Engine's been sputtering. I need it fixed today." Marcus stood there in the parking lot, watching Vince disappear down the road, his Harley's roar fading into the distance. He didn't know what to make of the offer. Work for the Hells Angels? It sounded like the kind of thing no sane person would ever consider. But something about Vince's words stuck with him. Marcus spent the next few days lost in thought. The offer Vince had made weighed heavily on him. He had always known what his life was about: fixing bikes, getting paid, and living simply. But this offer from Vince, to be part of something bigger, was something entirely different. It wasn't just about motorcycles anymore. It was about loyalty, trust, and belonging to a group that operated outside the normal rules. The Hells Angels were a world away from the quiet repair shop he had worked in. But now, he was being asked to be a part of it. He walked into the garage early one morning, the sun barely rising over the horizon. The familiar hum of the bikes and the clanking of tools filled the air, but this time, Marcus didn't feel like an outsider anymore. The other mechanics greeted him like a friend, their gruff voices masking the respect they had for him. He had earned his place here. But that didn't make the decision any easier. Vince was already at work, his hands steady as he worked on one of the bikes. When he saw Marcus enter, he didn't say anything at first, but his eyes gleamed with understanding. He knew Marcus was still thinking things over, weighing his options. Marcus didn't waste time. He walked straight up to Vince and stood there, unsure of how to start. Vince put down his wrench and looked at him. "You've made up your mind?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah. I have." Vince's face softened slightly, though there was still a sharpness in his eyes. "I knew you would. You're not the type to back down from a challenge." "I've been thinking about it," Marcus said. "And I'm in. I want to be a part of this. I want to help." Vince's smile was small, but it carried a sense of pride. "Good. I knew you'd make the right call." From that moment, Marcus felt a change within himself. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He wasn't just fixing bikes. He was becoming a part of something larger, something that had its own code of honor, its own way of doing things. The Hells Angels weren't a family that judged you based on where you came from or what you'd done in the past. They cared about what you could do, and how you could prove yourself. And Marcus was ready to prove himself. The first few days after making the decision weren't easy. Vince trusted Marcus enough to give him more responsibility, which included helping with the bigger jobs that came through the garage. These weren't just regular repairs, these were the types of bikes that had been through hell and needed more than just a quick fix. They needed someone who understood what it took to bring them back to life. Marcus was that someone. The other Hells Angels started to look at him differently. They saw him as more than just a mechanic. He was part of the team now. He was a trusted hand in the garage, and as he worked alongside them, he began to see the deeper connections they had with each other. There was something more than just bikes in this place. It was about loyalty, camaraderie, and standing by each other, no matter what. One day, things took a turn Marcus hadn't expected. A rival gang had started making noise in the area, and they were causing problems. The Hells Angels weren't the type to back down from anyone, and this was no different. They weren't looking for trouble, but they wouldn't shy away from it either. Vince came to Marcus with a plan. There's been talk. The other crew thinks they can push us around, but they're wrong, Vince said, his voice serious. I need you to be ready. You've proven yourself with the bikes. Now it's time to prove you've got the grit to back us up. Marcus didn't flinch. This was the life he had signed up for, after all. But there was still a part of him that wasn't sure what to expect. He had been a mechanic his whole life, working with tools, fixing bikes. But now, he was being asked to step into something much bigger than that. The tension in the garage was palpable. The guys were preparing for whatever was coming. There was a quiet sense of urgency, but there was also a calmness, a confidence that came with knowing they had each other's backs. Marcus wasn't sure what his role would be in all of this, but he knew that if it came down to it, he would be there for the team. As the day wore on, word came that the rival gang was planning to make a move. It wasn't a full-on attack, but it was enough to raise concerns. The Hells Angels were ready, but they were waiting for the right moment. That night, Vince pulled Marcus aside. I need you to stay close, he said. If things go south, I'm counting on you. You've shown what you're made of. I know you can handle yourself. Marcus nodded. His heart was pounding in his chest, but he couldn't afford to let fear take control. He had chosen this path. He had chosen to be a part of this team. And now, it was time to stand by them. The hours that followed were a blur of preparation. The bikes were checked over, the tools were ready, and the atmosphere in the garage grew heavier. It was clear that something big was about to happen. The guys made their final checks, and then, just as the night settled in, it happened. The rival gang rolled in, but they weren't expecting what came next. The Hells Angels were ready. The confrontation wasn't long, but it was intense. Marcus stayed close to Vince, his hands steady as he waited for instructions. When the dust settled, it was clear that the Hells Angels had come out on top. The rival gang wasn't interested in fighting any longer, and they quickly backed off. Vince looked at Marcus with a nod of approval. You did good, he said, clapping him on the back. I knew you'd be ready. Marcus didn't say anything at first. He was still processing everything that had just happened. But as he looked around at the guys, standing together, united, he realized something. This wasn't just about bikes anymore. It was about family. It was about loyalty and standing up for each other when it counted. Over the next few weeks, Marcus became an even more integral part of the Hells Angels garage. He was no longer just the mechanic who fixed bikes, he was a part of the crew, a trusted member of the family. He had earned their respect, not just for his skills with a wrench, but for his loyalty, his courage, and his willingness to step up when needed. As the months passed, Marcus felt something shift inside him. He had come to the Hells Angels garage to fix bikes, but now, he had found something even more valuable. He had found a place where he belonged, where his skills were appreciated, and where his loyalty meant something. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Resp the days after Marcus joined the Hells Angels garage passed by quickly. At first, he was unsure about everything: the rough-looking bikers, the loud noises, the constant repairs. But as time went on, he found himself growing more comfortable. The work was familiar, even if the environment wasn't. He had always been a mechanic, but now, he was fixing bikes for a group of people who lived life on their own terms. It was challenging, but it felt right. Vince had been right about one thing: Marcus was different from the others. While most of the other bikers were focused on getting their jobs done quickly, Marcus was more methodical. He took his time, making sure each part was in perfect condition before moving on. The bikers appreciated this, and slowly, Marcus gained their respect. They began to trust him with the more difficult repairs, the ones that required real expertise. And he never let them down. Every day, Marcus found himself learning more about the bikes, the tools, and the world of the Hells Angels. They taught him new tricks and techniques, ones that weren't found in any manual. The work was hard, but it was satisfying. There was a sense of pride in fixing something that had been broken, something that others had given up on. Marcus could see how the bikers felt about their bikes. To them, each motorcycle wasn't just a machine, it was a part of their identity, a reflection of who they were. And Marcus, in turn, started to feel a connection to them. As the weeks passed, Marcus's confidence grew. He started to feel like he belonged there, like he was part of something bigger than himself. The Hells Angels weren't just a group of tough guys, they were a family. A family that had its own set of rules and its own way of doing things. Marcus wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was trusted with the most important task in the garage: keeping the bikes running. One afternoon, while working on a particularly tricky engine, Marcus heard someone approach from behind. It was Vince. Marcus had gotten used to Vince's presence by now. He was always around, checking in, making sure things were running smoothly. But today, Vince seemed different. He looked more serious than usual. "Got a minute?" Vince asked, his voice steady but with an edge that caught Marcus's attention. "Yeah, what's up?" Marcus replied, wiping his hands on a rag. Vince motioned for him to follow, leading him to a quiet corner of the garage. "I've got something important to talk to you about," he said, looking around to make sure no one else was listening. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. What could Vince want to discuss? Was he about to lose his job? Was something wrong with the bikes? But Vince had always been fair with him, so Marcus wasn't sure what to expect. "Look," Vince started, "you've been doing great work. I've been watching you, and the guys have been talking. You've earned their respect. But there's something more going on here, something that I think you need to understand." Marcus frowned, unsure where this was going. "What do you mean?" Vince looked at him seriously. "I've been part of this club for a long time. I've seen a lot of people come and go, and I've seen a lot of things happen that shouldn't have. But I'm telling you now, you're different. You're not just here for a paycheck. You've got something that most of these guys don't have." Marcus was confused. What was Vince getting at? He wasn't looking for anything special, he just wanted to fix bikes and do his job. "You've got integrity," Vince continued, his voice softer now. "And that's why I'm asking you something. We need someone like you. Someone who doesn't just look out for themselves but cares about the bigger picture. I've got a job coming up, something big. And I need someone I can trust. I need you." Marcus stood there, stunned. Vince was asking him to be a part of something more. This wasn't just about fixing bikes anymore, it was about becoming involved in something bigger, something that could change his life. But was he ready for that? "You want me to help with something illegal?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the surge of anxiety he felt. Vince shook his head. "No. It's not about breaking the law. But it's something risky. We've got a rival gang trying to mess with us. And we need to protect what's ours. I'm not asking you to do anything dangerous. I just need you to keep an eye on things, make sure the bikes stay in top shape. If anything goes wrong, you're the one I trust to get it fixed." Marcus took a deep breath. He didn't know what to say. The idea of getting involved in something that had nothing to do with fixing bikes felt wrong, but at the same time, he didn't want to turn his back on Vince. Vince had given him a chance when no one else would, and now, he was offering him a place within the club, something Marcus had never imagined. It was an opportunity, but at what cost? "I don't know, Vince," Marcus said slowly. "I came here to fix bikes, not to get involved in any of your club's business." Vince nodded. "I get it. But just think about it. You've already proven yourself. The guys respect you. I'm not asking you to take sides or do anything crazy. Just be part of the team. That's all I'm asking." Marcus felt a weight on his shoulders, one he wasn't sure he could bear. He had come to the Hells Angels garage to fix bikes, to find something new and exciting. But now, it seemed like that simple goal had turned into something much bigger. Vince was offering him a place in a world he didn't fully understand, and it was tempting. But was he ready to step into a world that was so far beyond what he had known? "I'll think about it," Marcus said finally, trying to buy himself some time. "I just need to know what I'm getting into." Vince gave him a nod of understanding. "Take your time. But remember, this is your chance. Don't let it slip away." Marcus watched as Vince walked away, his mind swirling with uncertainty. He had always lived his life by the simple rule of doing what he knew best, fixing bikes. But now, he was being offered something more. Something that could change everything. As the evening settled in and the garage grew quiet, Marcus stood alone in the dim light, staring at the motorcycles around him. He had never imagined that a simple job would lead him down this path. But here he was, standing at a crossroads, unsure of where the road would lead. One thing was certain, though, Marcus knew that no matter what happened, he would never go back to the life he had before. Whatever came next, he was ready. ECTU. Those three words kept repeating in his mind. It wasn't every day that someone like Vince would say something like that to a mechanic, especially someone who didn't have the typical biker lifestyle. Marcus turned and walked back into the shop. He didn't need to pack up anything more. He had already gathered his tools and was just waiting for Mr. Collins to finish his paperwork. The anger and confusion from earlier still simmered inside him, but there was a strange calmness as well. Maybe it was the fact that Vince had acknowledged Marcus's skills. Or maybe it was the realization that he didn't have to stay stuck in a job that no longer appreciated him. As he walked toward the back office, Marcus thought about his options. He had just lost his job, but he had also just been given an opportunity. It wasn't an opportunity anyone else in his position would ever consider, but the more Marcus thought about it, the more it started to feel like something he couldn't pass up. The Hells Angels garage would be a place where he could prove himself, show his worth. The idea of working for the Hells Angels came with its risks, sure. But what did he have to lose? His life had always been full of hard work, and now it seemed like an opportunity had fallen into his lap. The more he thought about it, the more he felt like he couldn't ignore it. Maybe it was time to take a chance on something unexpected. The next morning, Marcus didn't waste any time. After a long night of tossing and turning, he had made up his mind. He called up his old buddy, Leo, who was also a mechanic, just to get his thoughts. Leo was the kind of friend who always told it like it was. When Marcus told him about the offer, Leo was quiet for a moment. "You're really thinking about it?" Leo asked. "I don't know, man. Something about it feels right. I've been working at that shop for years, and nothing ever changes. Maybe this could be my shot at something bigger. Maybe it's time I do something for me." Leo didn't say much more, but Marcus could hear the doubt in his voice. "Just be careful. Those guys, they're not your usual customers." Marcus hung up the phone, and with a sigh, he grabbed his jacket and headed out the door. He drove to the Hells Angels garage, not really knowing what to expect. The place was on the outskirts of town, tucked behind a row of empty warehouses. When he arrived, he saw a couple of bikes parked outside, but there was no sign of anyone else. As he pulled up, Vince's bike was already there, sitting quietly in front of a small, run-down building. The garage didn't look like much, just a few bikes and a faded sign hanging above the door. But something about it felt different from the moment Marcus stepped inside. Vince was waiting for him, sitting at a workbench with a half-finished engine in front of him. The garage was dimly lit, with tools scattered everywhere. There was a small area where some of the Hells Angels sat, but no one paid Marcus much attention. They all seemed to be minding their own business, working on their bikes or talking in low voices. Vince stood up when he saw Marcus enter. "You came," he said, his voice steady. "I figured you would." Marcus nodded, still unsure. "I'm here." "Good," Vince said. "Let's get to work, then." Vince showed Marcus around the garage, pointing out the bikes they were working on, and explaining the various tasks that needed attention. The place was filled with bikers who, on the surface, seemed tough and intimidating. But as Marcus spent more time there, he realized something. The Hells Angels didn't treat him like an outsider. They didn't look at him with suspicion or disdain. Instead, they respected him for what he knew, for his skills with a wrench and engine parts. By the time lunch rolled around, Marcus had already worked on 2 different bikes, fixing minor issues with both. He was in his element, doing what he loved. He felt the tension from the past few days slowly melt away. There was something incredibly freeing about being surrounded by people who didn't expect him to act a certain way or fit into a mold. Here, he could just be Marcus the mechanic. No one cared what his background was. It was his skill that mattered. At lunch, Vince sat down beside him, the two of them eating quietly as the others joked and laughed around them. Vince spoke first, breaking the comfortable silence. "You know, I've seen a lot of people come and go through this place. But you're different. You've got something they don't have. You don't back down. You stand your ground." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I'm just trying to do my job." "I know. And that's why I wanted you here," Vince said, looking around at the other bikers. "These guys, they might look like a rough crowd, but they respect people who know what they're doing. They respect hard work. And you've got that." Marcus didn't say anything. He wasn't used to hearing praise, especially not from someone like Vince. But as he thought about it, he realized that this was more than just a job. This was a place where he could build something, whether it was a reputation or just a sense of belonging. He wasn't sure, but it felt like the beginning of something bigger. As the day wore on, Marcus found himself getting along with the others more and more. They didn't talk much about personal stuff, but the camaraderie was there. The bikers would offer tips on how to handle certain repairs, and Marcus took it all in, learning from everyone he met. He started to feel a little less like an outsider. By the time the day ended, he was already thinking about coming back the next day, ready to tackle more repairs and build his skills even further. As he left the garage, Vince waved him off, a simple nod of approval. Marcus felt his heart pound with anticipation, but this time it was different. He wasn't walking away from a dead-end job. He was walking into a future filled with possibility. Marcus didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he was excited to find out. Marcus took a good look at the bike. It was an impressive machine, worn but well taken care of. The kind of bike that spoke of years of hard riding. But Marcus wasn't intimidated. He had worked on all kinds of bikes before: Harleys, Ducatis, you name it. He could fix anything if it had wheels and an engine. The next day, Marcus arrived at the shop like any other. He was ready to work, to fix bikes and get his hands dirty. The shop had become a place where he felt comfortable, where he could do what he was best at. Mr. Collins, the owner, hadn't said much to him after the Hells Angel incident, but Marcus didn't mind. He was just glad to have steady work and a place to hone his skills. The morning passed by quietly. Marcus worked on a few basic repairs, and customers came in and out, most of them regulars. He enjoyed the routine. His mind often wandered back to the night before, thinking about the Hells Angel, Vince, and how the bike had run so smoothly after he'd fixed it. That kind of satisfaction knowing you did something well was rare, and it made Marcus proud of his craft. But by mid-afternoon, things started to take an unexpected turn. Mr. Collins called Marcus into the office. It wasn't unusual for him to ask for a chat, but today, there was something different about the way he spoke. His voice was tense, and his posture rigid as he sat behind the cluttered desk. Marcus noticed that his boss didn't make eye contact. That wasn't like Mr. Collins. "Marcus," Mr. Collins began, "there's something we need to talk about." Marcus felt a sudden shift in the air, a knot forming in his stomach. He had no idea what this conversation would be about, but he had a feeling it wasn't good. "I've got to let you go," Mr. Collins continued. The words hit Marcus like a ton of bricks. He stared at his boss, unsure if he had heard correctly. "What? Why?" he asked, trying to process what was happening. Mr. Collins sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead with his hand. "It's nothing personal. It's just that I got a complaint. One of the customers," he paused, glancing at a paper on his desk, "Vince. The Hells Angel." Marcus froze. "Vince? The Hells Angel from yesterday?" He couldn't believe it. That didn't make sense. Vince had seemed satisfied with the work, and the bike had been fixed perfectly. Why would he complain? Mr. Collins seemed to be struggling with something, maybe guilt or hesitation. "Vince said you were rude to him," Mr. Collins added. "He claimed you took too long with the repair and gave him a hard time about the price." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "That's not true. I did the job, and I did it well. I didn't argue with him about the price." He could feel his voice rising with frustration. How could Mr. Collins believe something like this? "I'm sorry, Marcus," Mr. Collins said, looking uncomfortable. "I know it's not your fault, but I have to follow through with the complaint. Vince said he didn't like the way you handled things, and that's all I've got to go on." Marcus was speechless. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. He had done everything right. The bike was fixed, Vince had been satisfied. This couldn't be happening. "You're firing me over a lie?" he asked, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. "I don't want to do this," Mr. Collins said, clearly uncomfortable. "But there's nothing I can do. I have to keep customers happy, and if someone complains, I've got to listen to them." Marcus stood there, stunned. He felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. He had worked so hard, had built a reputation for being a reliable mechanic, and now, just like that, it was all slipping away. He could feel the heat rising in his chest, but he knew he had to keep calm. Yelling wouldn't change anything. "I'll pack up my things," Marcus said, his voice steady but tinged with disbelief. He walked to the back of the shop, where his toolbox sat. As he gathered his tools, he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. He had been doing his job, and now he was being kicked out for something that wasn't his fault. He didn't even know why Vince had made the complaint. Was it just because he had stood his ground on the price? Or was there something else at play here? He couldn't make sense of it. As he walked out of the shop for the last time, the weight of the situation settled on him. He had been working here for years, and now it was all over. His job, his routine, everything he had worked for, was gone in an instant. The anger he had been holding in began to bubble up again. He couldn't understand why things had gone so wrong. Just as he stepped outside, the sound of a motorcycle engine broke through his thoughts. The familiar rumble of a Harley-Davidson approached the shop, and Marcus didn't need to look up to know who it was. It was Vince. The Hell's Angel from yesterday. Marcus stood still for a moment, unsure of what to do. He wasn't in the mood to deal with anyone, especially not the man who had unknowingly played a part in getting him fired. But then Vince's bike pulled up beside him. The man removed his helmet and glanced at Marcus, as if he was surprised to see him standing outside. "Hey," Vince said, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. "I wanted to talk to you." Marcus frowned. "What do you want?" he asked, trying to keep his emotions in check. Vince took a deep breath. "Look, I know what happened," he began. "I didn't mean to get you fired. But I had to say something. I was pissed off when you didn't back down on the price, and I made a complaint." Marcus stared at him, his anger flaring again. "You lied about me?" he asked, his voice barely containing his frustration. "You got me fired over nothing." Vince seemed to hesitate, looking at Marcus as if he wasn't sure how to explain himself. "I didn't think it'd go this far," he said quietly. "But I respect you, man. You stood your ground, and that's rare. I wanted to make it right." For a moment, Marcus didn't know how to respond. He had been ready to hate Vince, to blame him for everything that had happened. But now, hearing him speak, he realized there was more to the story than he had initially thought. Vince's next words caught Marcus completely off guard. "I want you to come work for me," Vince said. "I've got a garage with the Hells Angels. I know you're good at what you do. I want you on my team." Marcus didn't know what to say. The offer was unexpected, but it was also tempting. It was a chance to move forward, to not let this situation defeat him. But could he trust Vince? Was this all just part of some plan to manipulate him? Before Marcus could respond, Vince gave him a knowing look. "Think about it," he said. "I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want to do. But I can promise you one thing, you'll never have to deal with anything like this again." And with that, Vince got back on his bike and rode off, leaving Marcus standing there, lost in thought. "I'll take a look," Marcus said, walking toward the bike. He opened the hood, checking the engine. There was definitely something wrong, but nothing Marcus couldn't handle. He looked up at the rider. "This'll take a couple of hours, but I can fix it." The man, who introduced himself as Vince, seemed satisfied. "I'll wait." With that, Marcus got to work. The hours seemed to pass quickly as he worked his way through the engine, adjusting the carburetor, cleaning out the air filter, and tuning the spark plugs. He worked with steady hands, focusing on the task at hand. The shop was quiet, save for the hum of the tools and the occasional creak of the bike's parts as he tightened bolts and made adjustments. Vince watched him work, his eyes never leaving the mechanic. Every now and then, he would ask Marcus a question about the bike, but mostly, he just stayed quiet. Marcus didn't mind. He was used to customers like this, people who didn't say much and preferred to keep to themselves. But as he worked, something in the air seemed to shift. It wasn't just the weight of Vince's presence, there was something else, something that made Marcus feel uneasy. It wasn't until Marcus finished with the engine that the tension in the room broke. He stepped back and wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. Vince stood up from where he had been sitting, stretching his legs. "You did a good job," Vince said, his voice soft but with an edge. "Let's see if it runs." Marcus nodded, stepping aside so Vince could start the bike. The engine roared to life with a deep growl, smooth and steady. The sputtering had stopped, and the bike sounded as good as new. Vince revved the engine a couple of times, a satisfied grin crossing his face. "Perfect," Vince said, turning off the bike and looking at Marcus. "You're good. Real good." Marcus smiled, proud of his work. "Just doing my job." Vince handed him the money for the job, and Marcus quickly counted it. It was more than he expected. He glanced up, but Vince was already halfway to the door. "You're not bad for a mechanic," Vince called over his shoulder. "Maybe we'll do business again sometime." Marcus nodded, watching him leave. As Vince got on his bike and roared out of the shop, Marcus couldn't help but feel a strange sense of pride. He had fixed a Hells Angels bike, something he'd never thought he'd be able to say. It felt like an accomplishment, even if it was just a regular repair job. But little did he know, that was just the beginning of a story that would change his life forever.